Welcome to St. George, Utah, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for our 2021 EMTB Shootout. We traveled down here to St. George and tested a bunch of bikes on a lot of trails. St. George is a really awesome area about 90 miles north of Las Vegas, and there's a lot of great terrain here, mostly desert, rock, and some fun jump trails. And it was a great spot for us to test the bikes, their battery range capabilities, and just the amount of fun and versatility each of these machines delivered. My name is Drew. Next to me here is Ryan, the Frenchie. We've got Cole, Greg, and Nick, U-Turn Hall. So that is most of our team of testers. A couple of the other guys didn't want to be in front of the camera. I don't know why, it might have been all your YouTube comments, but nevertheless, we will get started here just shortly after Cole does some introductions.
So we'd like to thank our health and wellness sponsor for this trip, Catalyst Distribution. They are the REI of high quality CBD products and have something for you from topicals to edibles. They're distributors of high quality CBD products and were nice enough to sponsor our EMTB Shootout, keeping our entire team well rested and ache free. Upon your first order, you can use code LOAMWOLF15 to receive 15% off your order.
So along with working with Catalyst Distribution, we decided to partner up with a couple of key brands whose products we really enjoy. So we'd like to thank Bontrager Shoes, Smith Helmets and Optics, G-Form Protection, and once again back on board is Schwalbe as our test tire for all bikes across the board. So without further ado, I guess we shall introduce the bikes, and we will start out with the trail category first. So first off, we will start with the Commencal Metapower TR29. We tested the signature build, has 140 mil of rear travel with a 150 fork and weighs in at 53 pounds with pedals. It comes with a Fox 36 factory e-bike specific fork, Fox factory DPX2 shock, Shimano EP8 motor with a 630 watt-hour battery. Moving into the drivetrain, we continue with Shimano XT 12-speed components, Shimano XT brakes with 203 rotors, a Fox transfer post, and moving into the Geo, a 485 reach, 613 millimeter stack height, 1279 wheelbase, 453 millimeter chainstays. This bike also had a 64.5 degree head tube angle and 77.5 degree seat tube angle, which definitely made it a pretty solid climber. Cole, why don't you start this one off? I know you like this bike quite a bit.
I think one of the big things that stood out was that motor had some drag compared to the other EP8 motors. So that was kind of my first thing that maybe pushed it down lower on the list for me. But the more time we spent on it, we had that great session on that rock garden, and it opened my eyes to how good that bike can be through rough terrain. The Geo for me at 6'1", that reach is spot on. Some of the other bikes in this category seem to be a little bit short, and I think for me, that 485 is definitely the upper limit of what I'd want in a trail bike. But overall, with that suspension package, I think the tuning of it was spot on. We could have maybe used some volume reducers in the shocks, as I think we'll get into with some other bikes here today.
It's kind of like a downhiller's like trail bike, you know,
for sure.
Instantly like stable. As soon as I got on it, I felt comfortable, confidence inspiring. When we sessioned that jump trail with all those doubles and drops and stuff like that, that's where I had the most fun. But I did notice it was a little bit long in some parts. Things got tighter. Yep. And I noticed that it took a little effort to get around some tighter corners and flick around.
Commencal Metapower TR29, a solid bike all around. That's kind of the quick intro to it. It's pretty sweet. It is a pretty sweet bike. it does look good. So, and from a value perspective, not bad, right? I mean, solid 630 battery, factory suspension, pretty good. Moving on to another bike that really impressed our whole team, the Fezzari Wire Peak Pro. This is a 140 rear, 160 front, weighs in at 51.4 pounds with pedals. Comes with a Fox 36 Performance Elite suspension, DPX2 Performance Elite shock. Geometry on this bike is at the opposite end of the spectrum. It has a 451.7 millimeter reach, 634 stack height. The wheelbase is 1,198 millimeters, which is way off from that Commencal. 434 chainstays and a bottom bracket height of 346 mil. So 65.5 degrees head tube angle and a 75.5 seat tube angle. So Nick, sorry.
I really like this bike. Despite its lack of length in the wheelbase, I think it rides almost as well over rough terrain, just thanks to the suspension tune and a pretty solid front fork. It climbs well, it descends well, it jumps well. The battery motor package, we could maybe take a little bigger battery on it. I think that a 630 would be nice, but man, that lighter weight feeling, that bike is really good.
Yeah, it did everything really well. Even bombing down those chunky, high-speed trails, it handled everything. I'm looking at my notes here and I just have all pros. I really don't have any negatives. Like it was, you have to like try and search for a negative.
And for the record, right, last year at our shootout, we tested the Wire Peak in its, I guess, 27.5-inch wheeled version, and very different.
The suspension and rear end just got overwhelmed going down like high-speed, chunky stuff.
We were pretty much expecting it to ride like last year's bike with just bigger wheels, and it instantly, like the first ride out here in the chunk, I was like, what did they change about this thing? It is so much better. And yeah, I like my only negative is battery size. That was it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could take this home to like Rocky Peak, where it's just as chunky as here, high speed, tight sections. You're popping on and off rocks and flicking it around stuff. This thing would be a lot of fun there.
And there's some talk of it being able to be a long shock and a little bigger fork. So you know, not officially endorsed, but could be a ripper on that.
Yeah. My, I guess, final bit on that Fezzari would be if you live in an area with maybe flatter terrain, or even if you live in an area with like kind of some steep, chunky, high speed stuff, it's going to be a really awesome bike. You're not going to suffer the downfalls of a very long, cumbersome bike. It is going to be snappy, playful. Like when we got onto some of that stuff like Ice House, which was high speed, I felt great on it. And then when we got into some of the more technical switchbacks, like I was loving the short. You know, I ideally like a 470, 475 reach. So it was short, but it was also a lot of fun. So I think if you are someone who lives in a very technical, rocky, tightly wooded area, the shortness isn't going to necessarily be a bad thing. If you live for the steep chutes and high speed, the shortness might be an issue. Moving on to another reasonably affordable bike, it is the brand new Marin Alpine Trail E2, a 150/160 coil sprung bike with a 54.1 pound weight. It has a Fox 38 Performance Elite fork, DHX2 Performance Elite rear shock, also a Shimano EP8 with a 630 watt-hour battery, 485 mil reach, a 631 stack height. Wheelbase comes in at 1264 with 435 mil chainstays, 340.5 millimeter bottom bracket height. Seat tube angle is the steepest, I think, at 78 degrees with a 63 degree head tube angle. Before we came down here, we got to break in and test ride a lot of these bikes. The Marin was one of them. It was an absolute ripper on one of our favorite test tracks up in Bend.
Wanted to be an enduro bike, but it didn't have enough of the characteristics of a trail bike.
The downside, like you said, is I feel like it's not quite in either category. The spring is a little too soft to be, you know, the stock spring's a little soft and you run a lot of preload to be on the enduro side, but then the whole suspension package is pretty soft to be on the trail side as well. So it's kind of in between. But man, if you're choosing one bike to kind of do it all, that thing is fast, it climbs well, It handles really gnarly terrain.
It looks sick.
And
Yeah,
it
it
looks
looks sick.
amazing.
It did, for me, hold flat corners, one of the best.
That thing does corner so well.
The Marin is an awesome bike. I wish it was a little bit more lively. I think the Performance Elite rear shock, not having the adjustability, really, you can't really fine tune it very much. Obviously that's a cost cutting, measure to keep that bike under $6,000. I would have loved to have been able to play a little bit more with compression and rebound, specifically rebound, and kind of get that bike to just feel a little bit more poppy and playful. Like, it'll eat the Chunder. Like, it's awesome. It rides like a bike in that enduro category for sure. But I think maybe a little bit more tuning capability on that rear shock would make it feel a little light and lively, which would bring it back into a more playful trail bike, which I feel like it could be.
Yeah! Oh! Oh my God.
Next, we have got the Niner Rip 9. It is the 3-star SX Eagle build, also under $6,000. This is a 150/160 bike, weighing in at 56.2 pounds. RockShox Zeb R fork, a DPX2 performance shock, Bosch Performance CX Gen 4's motor with the 625 power tube battery. This has adjustable geo, 465 to 470 reach, a 641 stack height. Wheelbase is 1,253 millimeters with a 450 chainstay and 76-degree C-tube angle and a 64.5 head tube angle.
I appreciate the Bosch. The suspension was plush off the top, which I appreciate, but it just felt heavy. It rode heavy. It is heavy. I kind of just really couldn't get into it. It did everything well, climbing up and going down, but I couldn't really get into it. Yeah, but
You weren't inspired.
No,
The motor is inspiring.
if it didn't have the motor, it'd be a dog.
That being said, we did get a pre-production model, not with this exact suspension spec on it. And I think a little stiffer front end would have done a lot for that bike. It is a little bit heavy at 56 pounds.
I did feel the brakes with that heavy of a bike in a guide package. They did get some fade.
For sure.
And in a heavy bike, I would expect to maybe, not saying heavy is bad, because there's other bikes that are close to this weight, but that guide brake package definitely felt underpowered.
Is there a person you would recommend this to, or what does that ideal rider look like, do you think?
Just someone who likes to just go down the trail, good amount of speed, and plow through stuff. I think this thing would suit you well.
That really enjoys climbing and trying to push technical climbs, because that motor really does make a difference at the end of the day.
So moving on, we've got one of last year's winner, the Trek Rail 9.9. And it is a 150 mil bike, weighs in at 51 pounds. This model comes spec'd with the RockShox Zeb Ultimate, a Super Deluxe Ultimate rear shock, has the Bosch Performance CX motor with a 625 battery, 465 or 470 reach, 630 mil stack height, 1,243 millimeter wheelbase with 448 chainstays and a 339 millimeter bottom bracket height. C-tube angle sits at 75 degrees with a 64.5 or 64.9 degree head tube angle. Who wants to lead this one off?
I have one dislike, and it's a personal preference.
Beyond the fact that it costs $10,000?
Well, we're keeping prices.
Is it the dropper post again?
Well,
Everyone's done hearing about the dropper post. 200, got it.
The Zeb, I like the 38 more. In all this riding we've done, I've had better experience on the 38. For me, when I go to ride one, I know how I want to set it up, and then I can just leave it. The Zeb for me was a little more finicky and wanting to kind of needing to experiment with maybe some volume reducers. But that aside, the Zeb did really good on this fork, which I think we're all going to agree.
This bike rips. This bike rips. Like, plush off the top, and it feels bottomless. And Even when we took that bike out with the Enduro bikes and we rode down some of the even chunkier stuff and testing the Enduro bikes, this thing, you were able to charge. I never felt held back.
The suspension package, their tune is great.
Yeah.
The brakes are strong. The motor's the best in the pack.
I mean, if you're looking at one of these $6,000 bikes, is this bike $4,000 better?
That's a very tough question, especially when you got to pay for diapers and you got daycare and you got other stuff to pay for.
It's one bike that can do everything. You're not having to buy an enduro bike, a trail bike, a downhill bike. This bike really can do everything.
You forget you're on a bike when you're riding.
Yeah, you really do. I've got another critique though I'd like to add, and it's something that I dealt with on last year's rail and some other treks I think as well, is that's the rear axle coming loose as well as linkage hardware. I would love to see Trek figure that out. I don't know if you guys need some more Loctite or what's going on, but yeah, that rear axle is regularly coming loose. And
such an issue that you run zip ties through your linkage bolts, so you don't lose your linkage bolts.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's
on a $2,000 bike, it's not necessarily something you want to do, but is that worth it for how good it rides?
It rides good. So let's wrap up the trail bike category with the Yamaha YDX Moro Pro. This is a 150 rear, 160 front, and weighing in at 53 pounds with pedals. A RockShox Yari RC spec with a Supreme Select rear shock. Comes with Yamaha's PWX2 motor and a 500 watt-hour battery. The reach on the Yamaha is 478 millimeters with a 624 stack height. Has a 1,253 millimeter wheelbase, 469 mil chain stays, and a 70.3 degree seat tube angle and 66.3 head tube angle. Ryan, I know you went to a ride day with Yamaha before bringing the bike out here. Why don't you lead this one off?
Okay. I was pretty excited that a big company like Yamaha, who's well known in the motorsport industry, came out with their own frame matched up with their own motor. So I was pretty stoked, pretty excited to see what they can come up with. I definitely like the feel of the motor. It's kind of a really natural feeling motor. Just kind of felt like a more fit, more stronger me. Pretty cool top tube, twin. It's like a twin tube design. You can access the battery port, which you liked. But it, you know, at an affordable price, it just didn't really do anything that well. I like to be playful on the bike and like to pop around and jump off stuff, and kind of hard to pick up the front end.
It didn't feel like it had the travel that it had.
Not at all.
Yeah, a lot of bikes, you know, like Fezzari, right? It's a 140 that felt like more. Yep. This is a 150 that felt like
way less.
120, 130.
There was no negative I found to that motor. Like you said, it felt like a fitter U. The power didn't come on super strong, which maybe in really steep punchy climbs could be a negative.
Could be a positive too.
But it doesn't lift at all.
It doesn't lift.
You don't spin out.
That motor, like, to hit it so good first try with that motor, the platform can definitely be changed.
So we did have a bike that had a pre-production battery in it. We were having some error code issues, which were not a huge deal, but they were requiring us to get off the bike, turn it off. Occasionally we would have to take the battery out, plug it, or put it back in, and then remove that error code. We sent an email just kind of asking for some advice if that was something normal that they'd seen. They ran it up the ladder in about 45 minutes. We got a phone call that said we had a pre-production battery and someone was on the way with a replacement bike.
Same day.
Same day.
Same hour.
Same hour.
Same hour.
Yeah, same hour. Customer service points, big time. I mean,
Best in the industry.
That's pretty amazing, and we are hugely appreciative that Yamaha and their team took this that seriously, that they really wanted us to have the best impression and chance we could on their bike. So major props there. Definitely a decent bike. I mean, it's a bike that can be ridden, and I mean, when we hopped on it, it didn't hold us back from anything. We didn't say, I'm not gonna hit this because I'm on the Yamaha. We just rode it, and it was just a little bit harsher, a little bit more bouncy, a little less composed. than
But
some
give
of the
them
others.
one more year of like refinement, and this could be a really good bike.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. That wraps up the trail category. So we're going to do the all-arounder, the most versatile pick, the shredders selection, and the dark horse, or the wolf in sheep's clothing. So are we pretty unanimous on the wolf in sheep's clothing?
For sure.
Fezzari?
No question.
Especially after last year's performance, to come out swinging this year,
What a surprise. For
Yeah.
the price point, you can't beat it.
well deserved, well deserved. So shredder's pick?
Commencal.
Commencal for sure.
Yeah.
That thing will hang on him any terrain.
Yeah.
For the record, I am outvoted, but I would put the Marin in that category.
Yeah!
Oh man, a little windy.
As
I'm
would
just
Sour
saying,
Patch.
Sour Patch
raises
okay,
his hand
so
behind the
wait,
camera.
Yeah.
It's good, but it's not. It doesn't feel like a trail bike.
But hey, that's
Shredder's
your
pick.
vote. That's your vote.
Oh yeah, shredder's pick. Yeah,
Shredder's pick.
Commencal.
So take that for what you will. Now, the all-around winner, the best in category.
No question.
What you would want to take home?
No question, it's the Trek.
Trek Rail.
Rail.
That's it.
Yeah.
Back to back.
I may choose that over all bikes. It's so good.
It's very close.
It's so good.
It's a ripper. So yeah. I mean,
Again,
that's-
and it comes in a lower spec for a much more
they
affordable.
do have more affordable
Yeah.
bikes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which still comes with a solid build.
They do.
Yeah.
God, that's a good bike.
It's a fun bike.
I'm taking that one home.
That's mine, actually. It's coming to Ben.
Yeah. All right, so now we will move on to the Enduro category and see what we got for the Big Travel e-bike bashers. St. George is a really awesome place for us because we've been able to have several different riding networks all within a very close drive of our house here technically in Santa Clara, which is right on the outskirt of St. George. Once we moved into the Enduro bike category, we switched up the trails a little bit, went to a few new places to ride that were a little steeper, a little more rugged, and it really gave us a good opportunity to see not only the amount of diversity that St. George has, which I know blew some of you guys away. Like you drive to one trail and it's, you know, red rock, you drive to another and it's just big, awesome sandstones, but it also was really useful for us in our product testing to get a variety of terrain and landscapes in. So I think the first bike we'll talk about is the brand new, to the US anyways, Canyon Torque On. That bike is a 180 mil front with a 175 rear, 27.5, and the bike weighs 54.1 pounds with pedals. And the Shimano EP8 system, 85 Newton meters of torque, again with 504 watt-hour battery. It is important to note that due to the timeline and as we're all used to hearing about COVID delays, we were unable to get the Canyon Torque On that will actually be sold in North America. So they sent us one that has got the European spec on it. The differences basically will be that it has a Zeb, RockShox Zeb R, Super Deluxe Select R, and Shimano SLX drivetrain instead of the Fox factory suspension. Geo, frame, material, everything else will be the same.
The suspension package, top notch, and the kinematics for me out of all the bikes on test was the best. It was the only bike that we set up at the house and did not touch the entire ride. And I was fiddling all day with everything else. And that was the only thing on that bike that, for me, really put it above a lot of the other bikes in this category, was that initial setup.
To address that, however, the bike that we will be able to buy in North America will not have that Fox factory. It will have a Zeb R
Which
and a
is
Super Deluxe
a
Select R.
significant downgrade, I feel
Yes.
like.
Yeah. For
How
our
much is
personal
that going to
preference,
affect your ability to tweak and get
Probably a lot. Yeah, realistically a lot. But does that take away from the agility, the playability of that bike? I don't think it does. The Geo is set up for more of that bike park e-bike, which, spending time in Europe, you do see a lot of guys riding e-bikes. They put a lot of fun on there.
Okay.
But That being said, it is meant for the park.
Yeah.
Like being more of like the backcountry rider and like XC oriented, that is not going to pedal to the backcountry. The bottom bracket is so low that you really have to think about where you're pedaling, and even downhill, you can't have your inside pedal tug.
Remember with that rock I threw up when I was leading the pack out on
this
that
big,
sprint?
yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely a park bike, right? It's and they don't really, again, they don't make any apologies for it. It's the torque with a battery and a motor.
Yep.
It's off the drop. Oh, that's good fun. 27.5 bike is loving the tight stuff.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun to corner. I mean, I think corner really well, jump. I mean, once you're kind of on the smoother trails and you didn't have to worry about the rocks, that thing rips and it likes to charge.
It's a fun bike, very intended user.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
And the battery life is somewhat
battery life
low.
is
Yeah,
definitely,
it's-
but it felt like it burned through that
It
504 quicker
burns
than
battery.
ours. The Haro Shift I09, 160 front and rear bike, 52.2 pounds, Fox 36 Rhythm E-fork, Fox Float X2 rear shock, E8000 motor with a Darfon 630 watt-hour battery. Size large, has a reach of 475, 636 stack height, a 1259 wheelbase, and 450 chain stays, 65-degree head tube angle, 76.5 degree seat tube angle. Haro.
What a
Let's
bike.
let
bike.
Ryan
Okay.
lead it off,
All right.
because when he showed up, I said, hop on the Haro.
And he's the only one. We've had this bike for a while.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
we've ridden
been
this a
riding this
lot.
bike in Bend and beating the crap out of it for a long time. And we never talked about it on the phone, so.
I mean, I hopped on it, instantly comfortable, instantly stable, and getting into it, and I'm like, holy cow. I mean, it's just, supple off the top to me is important. Maybe not to some, but supple off the top, rear end, but supportive. And this thing goes. Charged anything and everything, hucked, jumped. It was so much fun to ride. I really, really enjoyed this bike. It's affordable. There was some things that I think that we collectively would possibly swap component-wise, but for the build, 52 pounds, this thing rips.
For Haro to show back up, hitting this big, that's a testament to this. Like, it's amazing.
Blew me away.
It's not what I expected.
It is very playful. It is the side hit delight. Like you just point, pop, plow. Like you don't even have to land on the brakes. You can just let the bike eat, and
it's bottomless.
Yeah.
Sort of. And I think that X2 in the back, it's just the base level X2. You're not getting a bunch of adjustments, and it doesn't need it.
The Fox Rhythm 36 is the low point.
Yeah.
So I think we would swap the Di2 for a better fork.
So something that I'm sure people are going to ask us, this bike's got E8000, not EP8.
And never told us that.
Did any of you care?
No.
You didn't even notice it.
Didn't even notice.
Until
you look and you're like, oh, that's a different motor.
I think the only reason I would notice it is because of that short dropper, I was having to monkey pedal.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of a power difference.
The Intense Tazer Pro is next on the chopping block, fellas. 155 rear, 160 front, weighs in at 50.4 pounds, the lightest of the group. Fox 38 factory float, E-specific fork, DPX2 factory shock, EP8 with a 504 battery, Shimano XT brakes with a 203 rotor, SLX 12 speed. It is a mullet wheel configuration, Fox transfer factory post. Geo, we all liked on this bike quite a bit. 475 reach, 632 stack with a 1260 wheelbase, 450 chainstay, and 347 bottom bracket height. Seat tube angle 75.4 with a 64.9 head tube angle.
I'll start this one.
Okay, lead it off there, Nick.
So despite a baller build, dialed geometry, which we all really loved, it corners well. The suspension tune in the rear just isn't there. This thing just no matter how much pressure we put in it, no matter what amount of volume spacers we put in it, we could not get this to ride smoothly and not continuously bottom out.
Yeah, it was on the hut to flat yesterday. My ankles are a little sore.
I mean, none of us wanted to ride it for sustained amounts of time because of the fatigue the bike causes.
I mean, we tried the hardest to make this bike ride well. Like, we spent more time.
I mean, we went and bought spacers.
Tuning. We went to a shop because we ran out of volume reducers. I mean, we spent a lot of time and effort really
compression, played with pressure
on this bike.
Everything.
I mean,
and I think I rode it the most out of the group because
probably.
I really did like it.
You're a suspension tuner, right? So you love.
Yeah.
He was like, I'm taking this challenge on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make this bike ride better.
We're not heavy guys.
No.
And we're running 280 PSI in that at the end. Yeah. Like, that's.
Yeah, I mean, we're about 165, 170.
Yeah, we're all about the same way.
I know we were 250 plus on the air pressure.
Like, anybody over our weight would be bottoming that sitting on it.
Yeah.
But it, you know, it was playful. The front end felt great.
Oh, it did.
Absolutely.
But
and it
I
corners
like the mullet
so
in that
well.
setup.
yeah, I appreciate the mullet.
No, it's. I mean, it has some strong suits, but I think the rattly, chattery suspension are. I mean, for me, it's a deal breaker.
I couldn't buy it.
Yeah. Next up, we are going to talk about the Kona Remote 160DL. This is a 160 mil travel bike, weighed in at 55.4 pounds. RockShox Zeb Select Plus fork with a Super Deluxe Select rear shock. EP8 by Shimano with a 504 watt-hour battery. 467 reach on this size large with a 635 stack height. 1254 wheelbase, 435 chainstays, which is really short for that category. 350 bottom bracket height, 64 degree head tube angle, and 74.9 degree seat tube angle. Kona Remote.
This bike is really an all-around performer, I felt like. It climbs well, it descends confidently. It's the best feeling Zeb tune I think that we've had.
Yep, agreed.
And man, the brakes are solid. It's maybe a little bit harsh in the suspension, but the off the top, like you were saying, like you just can't get it quite soft enough. But I think we could probably dial that in with some spacers.
I think you have to ride the bike harder,
correct,
to get it to feel better.
But
I think
man,
if you're that casual, slower speed rider that has like real rocky or rooty terrain, I think it's going to feel rough for you. Sure.
It doesn't ride like a 55-pound bike. Yep. It rides lighter than it is, and I don't know if that is attributed to the suspension tune on it, because it is a little bit firmer. It keeps it higher up in that travel, and it is it's a smash bike, but it's also one that when you're smashing and you want to go around that little feature, you can change directions in it easy, which those shorter chainstays definitely makes a big difference.
Definitely, it made it fun to manual, wheelie, like slap around, like it was definitely a short rear end, made it pretty fun.
The stack height's a little high.
Yep.
We did slam the stem down, which helped.
Yep.
But man, that's really the only big negative I have about that bike.
We all had fun, super capable. Who do you think's the ideal guy for this bike?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's someone that enjoys modulating terrain. So terrain that's going to go up and down, but then also they want to spend an hour and a half climbing to the top and just smash
and
down.
Shred.
Yeah. It's a very balanced pack. I think that's what we talked about.
Yeah, it's the most balanced bike I think out of all the bikes.
Probably.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's move on to the Niner WFO E9. This is the 3-star SX Eagle package. It is a 180 front and rear and weighs in at 57.6 pounds. The current model bike comes with a RockShox Zeb R and a Fox Van coil. Bosch Performance CX Gen 4 with a Bosch PowerTube 625 battery and 465, 470 reach, 635 stack height, 1271 wheelbase, 450 chainstay, and 76 degree seat tube angle or 76.5 depending on your adjustable geo, and a 63.5 or 64 degree head tube angle. Who wants to lead off the WFO? Nick?
Well,
Cole?
Yes, for me, likes, dislikes.
Okay.
I like that it's a tank. I also dislike that it's a tank. It kind of it hits both ends of the spectrum really well, but at the end of the day, it is a very heavy, kind of sluggish feel. Climbs amazing. Like for me, that was the first bike I got on when we did the first hill climb challenge. Zipped right up to the top, no problem.
Yeah, that Bosch motor does make up for the 57-pound weight. And 180 mils is yeah,
it's a big bike.
It's a heavy, big bike, and it rides that way.
Yep.
You plow, you point, you shoot, and you're gonna mash through that. But when it comes to tighter terrain and you need to change directions and flick around stuff, you're gonna have a hard time trying to flick it around. It's gonna be a bit of work, so.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I feel like it takes a mindset change to get on the WFO. I remembered that, like, I have to ride it like I'm pissed off, and I'm like, you're turning. You know what I mean? And it's like, you're now turning.
Yeah.
And as soon as you did that and really forcefully rode that bike, it did what you wanted it to do.
Yep.
The only thing I think is that heavy of a bike and that big of travel needs a little bigger brake. A 200 Guide RE is just undergunned for that big.
It's the same with their trail bike.
Yeah, same story with the other bike.
Yeah. We need bigger brakes, I think. Yeah. Do we think guides should ever be on e-bike?
No.
Okay.
Unanimous decision.
So there we go. The Niner, WFO, a good plow bike, great suspension, plush, buttery. It'll erase mistakes if you're going over stuff, you make a bad line choice. It's comfortable.
Turn that snowplow early.
But it's not the play bike, it's not the little poppy shredder ripper.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the Santa Cruz Bullit X01 Coil CC. It is a 170 front and rear bike, 51.7 pounds, Fox Factory 38 float fork, RockShox Super Deluxe Coil Ultimate rear shock, Shimano EP8 with a 630, 475 reach, 630 stack height, 1267 wheelbase, 449 stays, and a 348 millimeter bottom bracket height with a 77.1 seat tube angle, 64 degree head tube angle.
This thing's loaded.
Yeah.
It's just loaded with goodies.
I mean, you're paying for it.
Loaded.
No doubt there.
But man, what a bike.
I immediately felt comfortable.
This, like, I don't come from a very big downhill background. My background's more in the XC world. I jump on this bike and I can hold the downhill guys on it. It is supremely confidence inspiring.
I liked a lot of things about this bike, but that off the top square edge that suppleness wasn't there for me.
But was that at high speed or moderate speed?
All speeds.
All speed.
Oh, see,
Yeah,
I
because
felt
he
like
said he noticed it climbing as well, that it was
Not as much climbing.
a little bit of
I felt like that got better as you increased your speed.
That's what I felt also.
Maybe I just wasn't going fast enough.
Exactly. Let off the brakes a little bit.
With the XC guy,
It is a point and smash. Like with
I disagree though.
I think you
because
can
it's
change-
also a jumper.
but
It's
that's
also
what I was
jibber.
going.
It's like you said on some of the other bikes, right? Like it feels a lot like a regular mountain bike, and I feel that way when I hop on that Bullit. Like if there was like a feature that I was nervous about hitting, if there was something that I'm like, I want to do this, but I'm just not quite sure. If I was on that bike, it would put me closer in that ballpark of like, I'm on my mountain bike, I can try this.
Well, like yesterday when I'm still a little hesitant after getting off of an injury, and I'm like, if I jump on the Santa Cruz, I'm fine.
Right.
And you just have the confidence going into stuff on that bike.
Yeah, and I think that says a lot to that bike, its performance, its design, and that platform really.
That bike, when it gets steep, is awesome.
True, I've ridden it on a lot of flat terrain around Bend, and it's still fun.
It's still fun.
No, it's still fun.
It's awesome.
Still fun.
No, absolutely.
So, okay, well, that puts us through the Enduro category, guys. Now, we can take our vote.
So,
Haro, yeah.
Wolf in sheep's clothing, we all know.
Right?
Haro.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
Not even close.
No
That
one
bike.
was expecting that to come out swinging and to pass many of the bikes and maybe be one of our favorite in the test.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So we will move on to the Shredder's pick. Now this is gonna be the bike you guys want to shred the most and the hardest. What do you think? Cole, you're the bike park shredder guy. What's your vote?
Canyon.
Okay.
Yep.
Nick?
I'm gonna take the Santa Cruz.
Okay. Any major reason?
It'll shred all things, and I mean, you get on, you're instantly confident in what you're doing. It hits every category of trail. It may shred your wallet.
Okay.
Then the Canyon is half the price.
That's true.
You can get 7 extra batteries and literally ride it all week.
Okay, Ryan?
I'm going Canyon.
All right. I guess I'm gonna go with that Canyon as well. I think when the pedals are even and you're in those groomed trails, right? Shredding the bike park or flow trails.
This area, St. George, not my pick for a shredder bike.
Correct.
But in my home trails, bike park, things like that, it's kind of hits all the marks for me.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun, playful, poppy bike. Definitely a blast. So, all right. Then we shall move on to the, I guess, the best in class. This is the bike that you want the most.
And is this the bike that I want Santa to deliver the most, or the bike that I want to go buy the most?
Let's go with the bike that you would like to wake up to and see in your garage tomorrow morning.
No questions asked.
No questions asked.
Okay.
It's the Santa Cruz.
Okay.
Santa Cruz with a very close second, Haro.
Haro for me.
Okay.
I'm going Haro.
Okay. I'm going to go with the Santa Cruz with the Christmas delivery caveat. I think for the performance, that bike, I mean, it is so fun, so capable, it is stable. It really is a incredibly well-rounded package, and I think it just does everything very, very well. I think we all agree, though, if we were going to go shopping and buy a bike, that the Haro would.
If I could, I think it would be really fun to build a Haro frame up from spec with the brakes that I want. Like for me, it'd be TRP, get some big old burly suspension on there, some really strong wheels, and I think it would end up being a pretty light build.
I think it would be on par with the Santa Cruz, but that being said, out of the box, you get it delivered, the Santa Cruz has the package that you just can't beat.
Whoa, jeez Louise! Oh my God.
Another one of Drew's adventures, huh?
Yeah. It's a great idea. Let's just keep pushing.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's it. I think we talked about just about everything that comes to mind. So thank you guys very much for coming along for the ride and being a part of our community and helping us come to awesome places like St. George, Utah, and test ride bikes for you guys and report back our findings. So thanks again. Really appreciate you guys watching. Leave a comment down below if you've got any questions. We're gonna do our best to reply. And be sure to subscribe because we got lots more videos and reviews coming. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you out on the trails.